you have to look at, where are these mitochondria living? What are they asking for? So, like everyone else, I start with supporting the mitochondria. So things like ubiquinol, although it was very interesting to me that the paper that came out showing that ubiquinol basically just gets oxidized to CoQ. So whether you're taking ubiquinol or you're taking CoQ, you're going to end up with CoQ, which is then going to be reduced to ubiquinol. So I think that's interesting. And then increasing your NAD levels, whether you like NMN or whether you like nicotinamide riboside or niacinamide, there are multiple ways to get that NAD level up. And then, of course, there are cofactors like vitamin B6 and things like that. So I use kind of a standard. Dr. Roundtree has a great list of things that are supportive of mitochondria, and I like his list. So that's the first piece. The second piece is, yes, you've got to have the blood flow. You've got to have the oxygenation. My argument is a lot of us are having mitochondrial poor function because we're simply not delivering the blood flow and the oxygenation that you need. It's like having a plant, giving it all sorts of great food and then not exposing it to the light. You're going to kill the plant anyway. So you want to get, you want to make sure that it has the appropriate oxygenation. And so many people, there was a beautiful paper years ago showing if you just look at the average SpO2 through the night, that correlates beautifully with the size of your hippocampus and other nuclei in the brain. So look, if you're starving your brain for oxygen all night, which so many people are, your hippocampus is going to shrink. So let's get that up. Let's get the blood flowing. Let's get the oxygenation. That's critical. Let's give you the ketones that you need at times. Let's make sure you are if you look at the metabolic flexibility, it's largely about care and feeding of your mitochondria. And then the other piece of this is these things doing all the right things don't help you that much if you're sitting there living in mitochondrial toxins. And, so many of us are. So, what is Parkinson's? A big part of Parkinson's is mitochondrial complex 1 inhibition. So if you're exposed to paraquat, if you're exposed to MPTP, if you're exposed to trichloroethylene, if you're exposed to a number of the mycotoxins, you're poisoning your mitochondria. So it's about supporting them. It's about giving them the oxygenation and the blood flow, but it's also about let's get rid of the toxins that are sitting in there. And there's some nice work out of IGL out of Germany where they're looking at epigenetics. I do think epigenetics going to be so helpful to us in the long run as they get better and better and better. We already have things for looking at biological aging, but by looking at the epigenetic programming, you're going to be able to say, look, this program is the sort of program we see when people are exposed to trichothecene A, what have you. And there's already a little bit of that going on with IGL, looking at what toxins are actually sitting on your DNA. But now we'd like to know what toxins are affecting your mitochondria and what sort of pattern does that lead to. As we do this, now we're looking at all these things that you and I have been talking about. We'll get better and better. We'll be able to focus more and more and say, look, this is the main 1 or 2 things that are driving this person's cognitive decline. Now we're dealing with 5 or 10 or 15 things. But if we'll ultimately be able to say, this is the thing that's driving this person's, and if we just get rid of that, they're going to do pretty well. So I'm very excited about the future of epigenetics because I think it's going to get better and better and better at telling us what's driving this. So those are the sorts of different pieces that we use to make sure that your mitochondrial function is optimal. But you're absolutely right. One of the big problems we have is there's not a simple way that, now we can look at p-tau and things like that. There's not a simple way to say, what is wrong with your mitochondria? Tell us exactly what's wrong. Is it at complex 1? Is it at complex 4? You got to do some pretty sophisticated biochemistry to get there. I would love it if you can now look at do a simple clinical blood test and say, aha, this is because of poor oxygenation, whatever.
And to add to that complexity of testing for mitochondrial function, one of the big challenges it's not just whether the mitochondria that are there are highly functional or not highly functional. It's that
Right.
they literally atrophy and die off. And as I mentioned earlier in this discussion, if you look at athletes who are doing lots of endurance exercise, they have 400% more mitochondria in their muscles than somebody who's got metabolic syndrome and who's sedentary. The only way you assess that, the main way you assess it, is by sticking a hollow needle into somebody's muscles and taking a biopsy and looking at the mitochondria and under a microscope, which is not a fun test for most people to do.